Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Soul Brother again with another show. And Dr. Soul Brother has, I believe, the remedies to cure some of your ills. Um, I want to discuss something that I think is very important and would love to get feedback on. And we recently had Veterans Day, as you know, on November 11th. And I want to address this whole thing about a brief history and motivation of black folks in the military, not just black men, but black women as well, respectively. Um, as some of you might know, and some of you might not know, black folk have participated in every theater of war that we've had here in the U.S. Now, when I say that, that's not to suggest that that's the only time we've served. We've served when it's been peacetime, but dating back to in terms of our role in the military, dating back to the Revolutionary War, which of course, what was happening then was slavery. Um, the War of 1812, uh, Civil War, which led to the abolition of slavery. Um, we fought overseas. In fact, yeah, we fought overseas um, in the Philippines and all this. We were involved with Theodore Roosevelt. Um, Going up San Juan Hill and all the rest of that. That's a history I think we need to really study. But uh, we also fought in World War One, World War Two, the Korean War, Vietnam, um, Kuwait, etc. But again, I don't want to focus. My main focus is not. I'll mention um, out the gate about us participating in wars, but it's mostly even when we participated in the military during peacetime. I think it's important for me to discuss the role of blacks in the Civil War. First off, um, if anybody's old enough, they would remember the movie Glory when it came out, and Glory was very revolutionary. Well, let me back up. When you watch the movie Glory, it should be clear that the role that our people played in the Civil War was very revolutionary. First of all, you have a group of black men, many of whom were uh, enslaved on the plantation, and they had no shoes, and the clothes were nothing but a bunch of rag tags. So then, when they're given shoes, given uniforms, it gave them a sense of pride and dignity that maybe they didn't have before. They started to walk different. This when you dress up, you kind of strut a little bit, kind of thing. Well, and also how it becomes revolutionary is this. This is uh, a space where you as a black man are you have a gun on you and you're shooting your enemy who is white on the other side. So it's the blue versus the gray. The blue were uh, the ones who were against slavery, and the gray were the ones pro slavery. So that's very revolutionary. And unfortunately, we're in a space where we don't really look at our um, Civil War heroes as revolutionary. And that was very, very revolutionary. But let me move on. Um, we played a role in World War One and in World War Two. Let's look at World War One for a second. And you say, well, black folk wanted to fight in World War One because they felt if they could prove we were patriotic and spill our blood for America, then we would get these rights that we would do. If you go back and watch the movie A Soldier Story, which is a fictitious story, but it deals with um, black folk who were in the military during World War II. There's a scene in the movie where um, Sergeant Waters, played by the great actor Adolph Caesar, says to one of the characters, CJ, um, that the First World War didn't do nothing for the Negro, but this one is going to change everything. Well, in a lot of ways, that's what happened because you had black men, whether they were drafted or whether they just enlisted, who were many of them. This is the first time that they had been away from home, in terms of out of the country and all of that. And um, this is at a time when the military was segregated, and that's the other thing. The conditions were deplorable under a segregated military, and here they are, segregated military. Then you're overseas in Germany, France, Italy, other places there in Europe, and you get a taste of some freedoms that you, as a black person, weren't accustomed to in your own country. So that makes some things go in your head like, hey, I like this. And when we fighting against fascism, which is what World War II was about, because they wanted to deal with people like Tojo, the Japanese guy Tojo, or Adolf Hitler out of Germany. No, that stuff had to go. That couldn't continue because you ran the risk of um, that being a global phenomenon, if you will. What so? Um, we won, and when I say we, I'm talking about the U.S. won that war, and black men came back home and again got a taste of some freedoms that they didn't experience when they were here on the home front. And then when they discovered that, hey, we we're getting this thing where um, still ill treatment here on the home front, and after fighting overseas like this, oh no. So what they did, that helped to jumpstart what was known as the modern civil rights movement. Okay, but let me go on. I want to speak to some of these people who want to bash the military, whether it's the Army, Navy, or any other branch of the military. Let me say this: if you choose not to go into the military, that's entirely up to you. It really is. That's your prerogative. But you should, at the very least, have respect for those who have served and who are serving. It's interesting that there's an anti-military position that came into being. And there are two reasons for this, and not necessarily in this order. Number one, um, if you look at what was happening um, during the Vietnam War, and when Americans of all colors were exposed to the horrors of Vietnam. And let's be clear, war is ugly, without question. But when they got exposed to it, that's what led to a lot of the anti-war demonstrations during the 1960s and all of that. And so you had black folk and white folk who were opposed to that, and other groups by extension. But one of the things I noticed, though, that while you had that, and understandably so, other groups, and I'm going to speak real candid here, other groups have a tendency to be a bit more nuanced in their outlook. Um, we have a habit of being, there's a difference between, um, how do you say, panoramic versus myopic. Unfortunately, a lot of us are very myopic when it comes to that. And what it does is that it leads to a sense that, okay, if I'm interfacing with this person who served or is serving, this person's a jackass. Now that's not verbalized necessarily, but that's definitely a thought, and you're wrong for that. You're wrong for that. Okay. Um, and I'm gonna break this down in case you haven't realized it. It's interesting that In the black community, you had outliers like the Nation of Islam and other groups who were anti-military and continue to be. Here's what's ironic about that, and I haven't really seen any scholarship on what I'm about to say. And if anybody knows of it, please let me know in the comments section. And that is the role that the military has played in the black movement. I'm gonna say that again: the role that the military has played in the black movement. What do I mean by that? I'm saying this: the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of people. You'd be surprised to know and learn people in the civil rights movement, people in the black power movement. I put them all under the umbrella of the black movement. Because whether you're talking about civil rights or you're talking about black power, it's all under the umbrella of the black movement. Plain and simple. But here's the point. People we've looked up to and admired who played a role in the civil rights movement. For example, Mr. Sidney Poitier, Mr. Harry Belafonte. Mr. Sidney Poitier was in the Army. Mr. Harry Belafonte served in the Navy. Okay. Reverend Hosea Williams. He served in the Army, I believe. I think it was the Army. Um, Medgar Evers, Army. Um, and a host of others who served. Um, and I want to put to rest this notion that black folk who serve in the military are quote unquote brainwashed. I'm not sitting here and saying that you don't have that, but to make a blanket indictment like that is very unfair, and not only is it unfair, it's frankly disrespectful. Okay, it really is. Remember I said before this notion that you're a jackass. You may not say that verbally, but it may not be explicit, but it's clearly implicit. But I want to address this thing about the role. I want to elaborate on this, the role that the military has played in the black movement. Now, it's funny. The Nation of Islam, let's holler at them for a second. NOI. You have been anti-military from way back when. Okay? Um, and it's interesting. Elijah Muhammad did not want to serve during World War II when he got drafted. And that's understandable given the fact that he was frankly too old to have been drafted. But here's the thing. He sided with the Japanese against the United States, but Japan was an imperialist nation, was it not? Come on, y'all historians, talk to me. Were they not? And not only that, I said earlier that America um, got involved in World War II because of what was happening in Europe. Look at Adolf Hitler. If Adolf Hitler had had his way, he would have knocked off a bunch of us as well. He was burning up Jews in the concentration camps and whatnot. But Adolf Hitler was no lover of black folk. He wasn't. But this thing about um, being anti-military, according to Nation of Islam, here's the irony that that's one that I cited that he wanted to encourage black people to side with Japan against white America when Japan was an imperialist society, and so Tojo was not our friend. Okay, he was not, and so folks frankly were right to go up against these bastards. But let me move on. If you look at the structure of the Fruit of Islam, which is their military, so called, in the Nation of Islam, all the drilling, all the look at the titles, lieutenants, um, captains, that comes out the military, the quote unquote white man's army. Okay. And not only that, some of those men, especially during the first resurrection, I cannot speak for today, but during the first resurrection, when Elijah Muhammad was on the scene, um, there were men who were in those capacities who were captains, lieutenants, etc. And all they did was bring their um, military background into the Nation of Islam with the fruit of Islam and their training. Look at the drilling and all that stuff. Again, that comes out of the military. But let me move on. Look at the Black Panther Party. Two of your founders, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. Of the two, Bobby Seale served in the Air Force. Okay. Then what else happened? If you look at, there were other people. Um, there were two of Bunchy Carter's older brothers who served. His oldest brother served in the army. Another brother served in the Marine Corps. Um, who else? Uh, oh, John Huggins served in the Navy. Okay, this is all before there. I mean, Bunchy's oldest brother didn't serve. I mean, he was not a member of the Black Panther Party, but his other brother, Arthur, who served in the Marine Corps, he joined. In fact, Bunchy recruited him into the um, Panther Party, and so and a bunch of other people who military background. Geronimo Pratt served in the army. I think he did 2 tours in Vietnam. Okay, um, so you had even those who were rank and file who had served. Then you had the US organization, which was a cultural nationalist organization founded by a man named Ronald Everett, who later was known as Maulana Ron Karenga. One of his lieutenants had served in the military, and a couple of others. There was another brother, I can't think of his name right now, who served. So you had that. So they brought their military expertise into that. And then when you look at the deacons for defense in Louisiana and by extension Mississippi, many of them, not exclusively, but many of them had military background, be it they served in World War II or Korean War. They had military background. Okay. Um, Robert, uh, st- he was out of North Carolina. Robert F. Williams, who served in the Army as well as the Marine Corps, who created the, I think it was a self defense group. They had guns and whatnot, and his background was military. Okay, so you had people who um, who served in civil rights movement as well as the Black Power movement. Again, all that I put under the umbrella of Black movement who served, and as a result, Black folk in this country benefited. We benefited. Now, it's interesting that things kind of died down after the Vietnam War was over. You had less of an anti-military position. However, picked up again going to the 80s, and then you had the Nation of Islam under Louis Farrakhan, who was pushing an anti-military position to the point where in 1991, the rapper Ice Cube recorded an album called Death Certificate, that was very popular at the time. And it's clear when you open the CD up, you can see images. 'Cause you remember when Ice Cube was with NWA, he had a Jerry curl. And even when he came up with America's Most Wanted in 1990, he had a Jerry curl on solo. The following year, in 1991, he'd cut out the Jerry curl, was had Fruit of Islam members um, there on his album. In fact, the intro to the song "I Want to Kill Sam," you hear the voice of a recruiter um, trying to encourage people to join um, the military. But if you listen to the song carefully, it's clearly an anti-military position. But my point is that is the result of the influence of the Nation of Islam. Now, I'm not standing here saying that the Nation of Islam is solely responsible for this anti-military position, but it's clearly has not it's been a great contributor. And also, it's interesting. There was a man in the Bay Area in Oakland who had a bakery back in the day called Your Black Muslim Bakery, and his name was Minister Yusuf Bey, and his was really an offshoot of the Nation of Islam, but he himself served in the Air Force. I mean, we could go on, you see, but um, and we also need to be clear about something else. I'm going to wrap this up. The military is not just for those who are walking aimlessly. There are those who are like General Colin Powell and Lloyd Austin, who served, made careers, and they uh, have degrees under their belts. So they weren't just in there as a bunch of grunts. They made names for themselves and served proudly and made names for themselves and their families and the communities and their country. Um, and I want to mention this as I wrap up. If anyone has not seen the film, discuss the uh, there's a movie called The 24th that can be seen on Tubi TV, and a brother named Kevin Wilmot is the director of it. It's I highly recommend it. Yours truly watched it twice already. Okay, I watched them twice. Watched twice in 2 days, and it's a must see film. And what's interesting about it, the film came out before, or was around the time I think of COVID, and we were in the thick of it. But it's about incidents that took place back in 1917 with black soldiers who served in the military, and you had a group of them, unfortunately, who were hanged um, as a result of um, a terrible incident that happened in 1917. I don't want to spoil it for those who have not seen it, but I want to encourage you to watch the film, watch it, sit down with your family, and discuss it, and even find books that deal with it. In fact, um, as of November 13th, or on November 13th, um, there was an turning of the conviction of those black soldiers in 1917. So that's one of the things that was done. And I'll say this in closing. Um, yes, it is tragic that that happened to them, and this literally happened a little over 100 years later in terms of this terrible wrong being attempted to be made right. However, this is a part of our history that should be known and not be forgotten. And one of the mistakes that we have made as a people is that we will look at things like that and cause us to develop an even stronger disdain for America as opposed to being nuanced. Nuanced. I cannot stress that enough. Then this is one of the things I want us to really understand. We need to be nuanced in our outlook. We cannot afford to be reactionary. We just cannot. And for this man, Derek Muhammad, um, who um, was on YouTube discouraging. This is a man who was who's a former Marine and discouraged black folk for serving in the military. I think it's very selfish and self-serving on your part to do that. And by your own admission, you're not a history buff. Well, I would encourage you, brother man, to really immerse yourself in the history of um, black folks in the military in this country. And I would go back and look at how the Nation of Islam has been very contradictory and frankly hypocritical as it relates to the outlook um, on the military. It's interesting that uh, I've interfaced and crossed paths with people of all stripes and hues. And as you know, there are people who have served and serve in the military of all stripes and hues. And I have to say, of all the people that I've crossed paths with, the only group who tends to be stiff necked as it relates to this is us. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. You go through Latino communities, in spite of the fact that they are oppressed, and some of them served on the front line during Vietnam and all of that, yet they have a more um, um, panoramic view, if you will, regarding the military. So I would highly suggest that we as black folk in America, we need to check ourselves from time to time. And I'm not sitting here saying that everything is perfect as it relates to the military. No, no institution is perfect. None. So because there are imperfections and inequalities, Do we just become the invisible Negro, to borrow from Ralph Ellison? No, you keep on fighting and you make your presence known and you try to pave the way as others have paved the way for you and me. You pave the way for others, and that's how you make things change. So with that, I'm going to end things right now. At some point I'm going to do another show down the road, dealing with military. And also, I plan to start doing live shows. So if anyone has any ideas, um, about topics to discuss pertaining to us, please let me know. Hit the like button, hit the subscription button. Um, but again, as I mentioned before, I do not need people who are naysayers and do not need people who will come on my channel and try to um, throw sand and mud on our ethnicity in this country and culture. Okay, because Dr. Soul Brother is about the uplifting of um, Black American culture in this country, something that is long overdue. And as I mentioned before, Dr. Soul Brother will not allow, hear me, will not allow people to come on here in the comments section or any of that that is adversarial to what I'm about. And you will be checked immediately. So, with that, have a good one. And until the next time, God bless.